Okay, here we are, everybody. This is July, and almost the end of July, and we're just now doing our July live chat. But we're here and ready to go, and we hope that you folks are beginning to join us. So while everybody is joining, go ahead, you members, Studio Insiders, if you're here already, let us know that you're here and let us know where you're from. We'd like to be able to sort of recognize different parts of the nation and different parts of the world that people who are watching our YouTube chats are coming from. It's always good to see a good representation of the world. While we're waiting for that, let me remind you that when we're doing these, there comes Mary Ellen Hyde from Vermont, and Carolyn from North Carolina, and Renee from Pennsylvania. Well, I'm glad to see the troops are gathering together. So let me remind everybody what happens here. We have the chat, but the members, you Studio Inside members, are the ones who ask questions, and I have to explain every time. The reason for that is when we open the chat for all the subscribers and the members, the chat window goes so fast, we're not able to grab the questions. And so we had to find a way to slow that down. And the only way we could find to slow it down was to set up the membership and allow just the members. That means that those are the ones who pay their little $4.99 fee every month to get to become a member and get access or be able to ask questions in the chat. But that's not all. We didn't think that was enough. So the members also get a free lesson from our lessons website every month, a free lesson download. That's a real popular thing. And so we have enough lessons there to last us for a long, long time. If we run out of lessons, we'll think of some other way to give you something extra for supporting us through becoming a member. To become a member, you click the word join wherever you see it on our YouTube channel. When you're watching one of our quick tips or during the chat, you see the word join, you click join. It will guide you through making your little monthly payment and get you all set up to be a member. And let's see, as I've been rambling on here, Courtney from New Hampshire, and Rich from New Jersey, and Marie from California. It's good to see you, Marie. We've missed you. I think you've been out and around the world, haven't you? So, okay, we'll get started in just a minute. The protocol, the way we do these chats, for those of you who are first time or who are attending for the first time, is that we always have a topic. We like to center the chats around a topic so that it'll be meaningful and everybody has some follow through, some way of doing follow through. So the topic that we have the topic. Topic today is clues. How does it go? Clues to perfect perspective. That we thought we'd make that a little bit mysterious because I think you might be surprised at what is really required for perfect perspective. Then we always have a little video for you at the very beginning. Usually doesn't last more than about 10 or 15 minutes. I think today's is right around 12. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, then the video I explain to you the concept, and then that's probably going to generate questions in your mind. Jot those questions down as the video's playing, and then once the video is over, we'll call for questions, or video calls for questions. That's when you ask your questions, and we place or center the entire chat around questions that you ask. So that's the way it goes, and it usually works out pretty good. So, Roger, how's it going? Are we...
I'm working hard in the background.
Working hard in the background. That's great. Are you ready to run the video yet?
I am.
Okay. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. I'm hoping that enough folks have gathered in so that they don't miss the video, because the video is that's the substance around which all the discussion will take place. So for those that, okay, there comes Cheryl and there comes Matt from Virginia. Cheryl is Montana. So yeah, we've got a pretty good representation. I think it's time to go. So run that video and I'll see you on the other side. Look at the angle of this dog's nose. Now watch how the angle changes as the dog turns her head. In this position, it's almost completely vertical. Yet when she turns her head in this direction, the angle becomes almost horizontal. Now it's taking a diagonal direction. And as she turns her head and looks the other way, it becomes almost horizontal again. How is that possible? Not only does the direction of the dog's face change as she turns her head, the size changes too. Watch this. Look at the length of her nose when she's looking in this direction and how short that gets when she looks in this direction. How is that possible when we know the length of her nose doesn't change at all? But knowing that is one of the traps we can fall into when we want to do a drawing of this dog or a painting of her. But fortunately, we can avoid that trap if we just learn how to pay attention to what our eyes are seeing. One of the best ways to do that is to consciously change what we look for when we prepare to paint or draw whatever our subject is. Now here's how that works. Rather than trying to draw the thing itself, ask yourself only 2 questions. 1, what directions do I see? And 2, what sizes do I see? Now here's the thing. These 2 visual elements, direction and size, with failure, are the only 2 components of linear perspective and foreshortening. And they are also the only elements that form the edges we see that create the shapes we see. Let's begin with the visual element direction. A direction is the orientation in which things are tilting or moving. And there are only 3 orientations: horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. And each of these 3 can move in only 2 ways. They can move straight or they can be curving. Let's pause right here and find the orientations in our dog's face before we look for the sizes. Okay, here's the clue I promised you in the title of this little lesson. And that clue is we see things because of the way our eyes are built to see them. The way we see directions, the way we see sizes, depends upon where we are, where we're located, where our eyes are located. Are we below? Are we above? Are we to the right or to the left? Are things in far distance and that's the way we see them? Or do we see them closer to us? Our eyes are built to see angles and sizes in the way that we see them so that we can find our way around in space. So, we know that the dog is turning its head from right to left, in some cases a little bit up and a little bit more down. Which viewpoint are we going to see? Now, the way the dog is turning her head is also playing a role in the way we see those angles and sizes, but where the photographer is located is determining that too. And that's the main thing. We're located as the photographer was located. So that's the direction from which we'll be looking at these things. And now we will choose just one of those positions. Well, we have this position where the dog is looking straight ahead. We have this position where she's looking up and to our right, or her left. And we have this position where she's looking up to our left, to her right. Let's select this position. Her head is oriented more horizontally from her nose and mouth to the back of her ear, and is oriented more vertically of the way her head is placed from top to bottom. Within that vertical and horizontal orientation, we see directions of her nose moving horizontal. See the direction of the top of her head oriented a bit more diagonally like this. And we see that the top of her head oriented diagonally is slightly curving. That's the way it's moving. Then we see it changing directions here. We see it changing directions here with a slight curve. Remember I said that it's the changes in directions that define the edges the way we see them? So we're looking for edges. And if you're looking for edges and asking those two questions, then that's all you'll need to do. We're looking for edge here. Now this particular edge is moving a slight diagonal, more in a straight direction. And when I'm saying direction, I'm talking about the orientation. And when I say the kind of movement, I'm talking about whether it's curving or straight. Here's something interesting. We see the orientation of this direction tilted in like this, and we see then it has a very slight curve within that tilt. The tilt is continuous in a curve. And then we can move on around and find the others. Now, if I take time within this little segment to point out all these changes in the kinds of movement and in the direction of the movement, it will take the full hour. I just want to give you enough clues to show you what I mean when I say you ask those questions. In what direction is it moving, and what is the size? Now, we can talk about size a little bit here as we move in the direction, because if you will notice, the length, which is also the size, the length of this direction, this angle, is longer than this. As we move around the edges of shapes, if we pay attention to the length of those movements, and we can compare them to other lengths that we see, or we can take them intuitively, but as we compare those lengths, and so we're comparing sizes as we're discovering movements, or discovering angles. In other words, we're looking for both linear perspective and foreshortening. Now, at this point, I want to show you where foreshortening enters into all this. When we're looking at a side view of her face, we have the length of that angle. It's from here to here if we include her ear. So that is the direction. That is the orientation. The tilt of that angle is the orientation. It's moving in this direction. And the size is from here to here, a relatively long size. Now, we're going to keep that line there, but change the viewpoint. Now, we can see the length of this one. Let's move that line over just a hair and tilt it in a vertical direction. Now, with this position of her looking towards us, let's draw the line now from the top of her head to the top of her nose. And you notice this line is shorter than this line. That's what foreshortening is. So when your viewpoint changes, or the image changes, you will often see foreshortening. Look for that, especially when you have something that's longer that appears shorter as those viewpoints or movements change. Another reason looking for sizes is the better way to go is that we can then see, when we look for it, we'll see it. We can see the differences in the sizes of shapes within shapes. So we see the overall shape of the dog's face at this viewpoint. And then within there, we see the smaller edges that go around her eyes, for example, here. And then we see the edges tilted here. If we come over, we can see that edge tilting that way. Then we can see it coming around this way and then coming around this way. We can see the nose part of the dog starting about right here at the eye, coming this way, tilting down this way, changing angles this way, changing angles again this way, changing again this way, changing again this way, curving this way. Then we can see how we can form those characteristics of the animal as we are seeing them, rather than some notion of what a dog should look like. Same thing with ears. Ears often just get stuck on, but they're so much a part of the face. For example, the ears are not just here. They begin here. What do we have? We have an angle that's going up this way. It changes and turns in this direction with a slight curve. It changes and goes in this direction. It changes direction again, again, and again. Then the ears themselves are not identical. We see this ear moving up in this direction, slight change and a slight curving here, slight changing in the tilt here, a slight change in the tilt here. It's a considerable change there. And then a slight change in curving as it goes around, slight change in the tilt of the angle. On this ear, I want you to see how they're different. This ear, it goes up with a slight curve to about right here. Then it changes and it comes down in a straight direction, straight orientation. Remember, you have curve and straight. And then it turns again and it comes down in this direction. Well, you can see already from what I've shown you that if we ask those questions, what directions do I see? What sizes do I see? Most likely we're going to draw what our eyes are seeing. And that's what we mean in the title of this little lesson by the word correct. It's correct when you draw it the way you see it, not when you're following a rule, not when you're seeing what you think somebody else is going to see. It's only correct when you draw it the way your eyes see it. Now, this is a good place to stop and let you ask your questions. We ready? Okay.
Do you see yourself?
Huh?
Do you see yourself?
Oh, yeah, I see myself. I mean, I'm ready, right? All right. Yeah, I still haven't learned the art of reading signals yet. Okay, folks. Well, there you go. Now, were you a little bit surprised that I didn't say anything about 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, all that kind of stuff? What I'm trying to emphasize here is that we get away from thinking that we have to paint by rules, and that includes perspective, because perspective is about seeing. When we are looking into distance, perspective means the way our eyes see it. What is the perspective of our eyes? And I'm thinking these days that the more emphasis we place on how our eyes are built to see, maybe the better we can understand. All we have to do is learn to ask the right questions about how we see, how our eyes see, so that the kinds of perspectives that we have grew out of really needing to be able to do diagrams for architecture, be able to understand architecture. And of course, we know that the linear perspective itself was first put into some sort of theory by Brunelleschi during the Renaissance time. Remember, he was an architect, and so it was more of an ability to create architectural plans to understand how the eye works, to show that in a drawing that would show how the building was going to look and so forth. I don't want to go too deep into that, but of course those things have been very helpful. That kind of analytical perspective is very helpful for analytical purposes. And sometimes it can be helpful to painters, and sometimes it can be more of a hindrance, because sometimes we'll read those perspective rules, but when we get out in nature and try to apply those rules, we don't really see the application or see where the application will work for what we're trying to do in paintings. All right, so the questions are beginning to come in. Rich asks, so proportion and perspective are like two sides of the same coin. Yes, let's say they work together. Proportion has to do with the size relationship of things, how small or how large two things are in relation to each other. You can't just have proportion of one thing without comparing it to something else. And then, of course, the perspective itself is about how our eyes are seeing things as they are located in space. So then we're talking about foreshortening as a kind of perspective that shows how we see things, images change into overlapping, or the way they overlap each other when they change in space. They change their position, or when you change your position. Remember, it's where you are that causes you to see anything, causes you to see the angles tilting in any way they're tilting. So you and I could be looking at the same tree behind me. I could be on one side of it and you could be on the other. I could be up close to it and you could be further away, and we'd be seeing angles tilting in a different way, in a different direction. We'd see it according to where we are, not according to how it's supposed to appear. So that's why I'm trying to, these days especially, if you've noticed, I'm placing more and more emphasis on looking at how an image is made. How are you seeing those lines move around the edges of an image, and how are you, and of course I talk about that in relation to what the light is doing and all those kind of things, but today we're focused primarily upon the whole perspective, how we see perspective. Cheryl asks, I have trouble with line lengths consistently drawing building roofs act too short. It seems the size of the paper I'm drawing on presents a limitation in my mind, so I constrain the perspective. I'm hoping this workshop that you'll be attending Wednesday is going to help with that, Cheryl. The tilt of the line, oftentimes we can be misled, especially when we're drawing in plein air. A lot of times we can be misled by the size of something and the size of the paper. Well, if you the first line, the length of the first line you make, no matter what the length, where that line is, no matter what the line is relating to, something that you're looking at, that length is going to determine the length of all the other lines. So if you have a small space, your paper is a small space to work in, and you're starting with, say, the roof of a building or whatever, if you start with the shortest line that you see, say, in the roof of the building, and then the next line that you make, compare the length of the next line with the previous line you made, as you find the angles, those lines in which those lines are tilted, the direction, and just always compare one size to the other as you move along. And I think you'll find that correcting, but I'm hoping that the workshop Wednesday, for those of you who don't know, the Wednesday workshop we'll be doing is about perspective, seeing linear perspective without rules. Once again, I'm taking the rules away. and showing how to see those angles and the size of those angles without rules. And also, so I won't go really deep into that, but I think one thing is just to realize the first line you put down should determine the length of every other line you make when you compare them. So you put the first one shorter, even if the next one's longer, if you sort of gauge how much longer is it, and you relate them one to the other, then you can begin then to get a sense of how long that first line should be according to the size of the paper that you're working in. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know, I hope I didn't give you any, I hope it wasn't more confusing than it was an answer. Before I forget, I just will make an apology about these commercials that keep interrupting. YouTube is no longer giving us the option of broadcasting without commercials, and they haven't given us an option of anymore of not having commercials to interrupt a video. So if the commercial comes on, just click go ahead or whatever, skip, and get it out of the way as soon as you can. But they do not have our permission to do that, and I want you to know that I resent it very, very much, and Roger does too. So I just hate dealing with commercials. It's bad enough we have to deal with them to begin with, and I realize that they are paying the bills, but put them in areas where they belong, where they don't interrupt content. All right, that's enough of that. I did my rant for the day. All right, Cheryl, looking forward to the workshop. I think I get in a hurry and forget to compare. Yeah, well, don't do that. Remember to compare. Well, because when we're creating images, everything that we do in the image is comparing. It's always comparing. We can't remember in the warm and cool. We can't designate necessarily, especially if we were dealing with more desaturated colors. We can't say one is warm necessarily unless we have something to compare it with. So we found in there that a color can be warm if it's around the same color can be warm in its relationship if it has a cool around it, but be cool, same color, cool if it has a cooler color. I said that backwards. It can be warm if it has a cooler color around it. It can be cool if it has a warmer color around it. So everything is relationship. Everything in painting is relationship. And in order to be able to see and communicate relationship, we compare. So I didn't mean that as a sermon. I just meant it as a little bit of an aid there, something to kind of guide you as you're moving along. That you've heard me use the word, all of you have heard me use the term image trap an awful lot. And remember I said here in this video that knowing this stuff about, knowing about the image itself could be a trap. And that means that if you're focusing on drawing a dog, there's where your trap is, right there. If you are just trying to get it right, you're trying to get it right, you're trying to make it look like the dog, you're trying to make it look like the dog, you're struggling because it won't look like the dog, and it looks like the dog looks more like a goat than a dog. I mean, how many times have I heard all that kind of stuff? That's because you're trying to get it to look like a dog. That's exactly what it is. When you're trying to make an image look like what you're trying to make it look like, you're going to struggle unless you just have this natural sense for seeing the relationships of the direction the angles go in, and the direction and the kind, the direct direction and the length and the size and that sort of thing. Cheryl says, can it be said that line length is proportion and line direction is perspective? Yes. Yes, I think the word proportion relates to size. Anything that relates to size would relate to the length. So yes, the proportion would be the size, but the direction, the direction in which it's moving, the way it's two things. There are two things involved there. They're both the orientation of the direction, and not just that, but the kind of movement it is. So both of those have to do with perspective. But yes, I think if that kind of distinction helps you to understand it, that's a good way to put it. Now, I wouldn't call it a rule. It's not a rule. It's what you observe. You're always going to find that. In other words, when you're looking at something, the way your eyes see it is, and the way you draw it according to the way your eyes see it, that is not a rule. When something is a proportion, something is smaller than something else, that is not a rule. That's comparison. Because there's no rule that makes it smaller. It's smaller because that's how you're seeing it smaller. I wouldn't call that a rule. A rule is when you say something like this. It must be like this. A rule is saying if you have correct linear perspective, then lines must be receding, or stuff like that. So we find that's not always true in nature. That there are always going to be variations in nature. And if we're going to be painters rather than, how can I say this without saying, if we're going to paint what we see, then we learn to see so that we know how to paint what we see. We learn to see what's there. And we don't need a rule to see what's there. All we need to do is find ways to recognize what's there. To not look at the image, but look at what's making that image appear the way that appears. Okay, Stella from Montreal, how about framing the overall object with a square or rectangle? Well, that does limit it. That's all we have there is we have a way of limiting where we're locating. And I guess you said we're locating what we see, or we're locating or limiting the perimeters around what we see. For example, just what I did just there. If I create a square perimeter, like with my hand, and I pull it up close, you can only see my face. But if I push it further away from my face, you see surroundings with my face. Well, you still see those surroundings doing the same things as far as the angles, as far as the values and the colors, as far as the size comparisons. It's doing the same thing. It's not doing anything different, but we're limiting the content when we're establishing the boundaries. We can decide the boundaries to be anywhere we want to within a square or a rectangle, but the perspective has to do with what that content is doing in the way of which way those lines are moving, in which direction those lines are moving, and how are they moving, straight or in a curve? Are they moving horizontal, vertical, diagonal? I neglected to mention in the video, but I hope you know that already. We have the diagonal as a kind of movement, but we have multiple diagonals. We have diagonals, and we think about the clock between the number 12 and 3. Every minute creates a different. If you've got the minute hand moving, a second hand moving from 12 to 3 of an analog clock, every one of those is a different diagonal. But you have only one vertical. It's only one way vertical can be, and there's only one way horizontal can be. But there are many ways that diagonal can be. So when we say diagonal, then we are talking about, we locate the kind of diagonal. What is that tilt? When it tilts away from being horizontal or vertical, it's some kind of diagonal, and that's when we pinpoint the direction. So there's that. Nobody asked that question. I gave the answer anyway. Like length and width.
In horizon line.
Stella, huh?
Two-part, in horizon line.
Oh, and horizon line. Okay, let's don't even talk about horizon line. Let's don't even call it that. In the workshop, I call it eye level. The term horizon line, I've used it many, many times in my teaching, but the term horizon line is confusing because we have the horizon of the landscape, and we see the horizon right here, where the earth meets sky, the way we see it, where we see earth meeting what we see as sky. We consider that horizon. But then we say we have a horizon line. That's our eye level, and I'm trying to delete the term horizon line out of my vocabulary. That's eye level. Wherever your eyes are located is always horizontal. What you're going to see there, wherever your eyes are located, if it's not inherently a diagonal tilt, but if it's say you have a vertical that's aligned in this direction on either side of you, or on one side or the other of you, and then you have horizontal lines in there where your eye level is, those are going to be horizontal. But above your eye level, those are going to be diagonal. They're going to tilt down. They do tilt down towards your eye level. Below your eye level, those tilt up towards the eye level. And that's the way our eyes are built, to see that way, so that we can find our way in space. So from that sense, I would say if we call it our eye level, then how we see lines or images tilting is determined by where our eye level is. Now, where I am right now, if I'm seeing, if I were in that space, I'm seeing behind me. And it won't work that way necessarily if I'm just looking at the photograph, because photograph has already been, that's already a two-dimensional surface that has been, that is the photographer's eye level. But if I'm out in location and I'm looking at this viewpoint right here, then where my eye level, where the photographer's eye level, but if I'm out in location, where my eye level is going to see those tilts going in one direction. If I lower my eye level by sitting down, that's going to change. If I raise my eye level by maybe climbing on a ladder or standing on something higher, that tilt's going to change. So where we are, where our eye level is, determines how we see things in plein air. Now, so many people these days are accustomed to working from photographs. We don't pay attention to that. It's always the photographer's eye level when you're working from photographs. No matter where you crop the photo or how you crop it, it's still the photographer's eye level. But when you're out in plein air or in your natural environment, if you're doing drawings or paintings from your natural environment, that's different. Your eye level is going to change. And wherever your eye level is, it's where you're going to be looking for things to be more horizontal if they don't have an inherent tilt. What I mean is, if this pen is tilting this way, that's its inherent tilt. But if I have it just sitting on a surface and I change my point of view, then that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Okay, and those are not rules. That's just the way your eye works. That's what I'm trying to get across. That I'm trying to teach you to look for how your eyes work, look for what your eyes are doing and how your eyes are seeing, rather than to follow some rule somebody's put down in a book and told you that this is the way it's supposed to be. I just don't appreciate that at all. Books that tells you how you're supposed to be seeing, I don't appreciate that. Anyway, you sense Rich, you sense it almost subliminally when the perspective is off. If it's not always easy to figure out, but it's not always easy to figure out. You're absolutely right about it. We know it. If the perspective is off, we look at it, we know it. Now, when you know what to look for, you will know where to see it off, how to see it off, when you know what to look for. And that is one of the differences. But if you don't know, like if it's what we consider the layperson, if a painting has perspective off, and a layperson looks at it, they'll say something's wrong with that. I don't know what it is, but something's not quite right with that. The building's not quite right. But you, as the artist, when you know how to look for these things, you'll be able to look at it and say, well, I can tell you why it's off, because your eye doesn't see that way, and you can point that out. Van Gogh didn't see perspective very well. I think Van Gogh painted more from his response to images than from how he was seeing them. But you remember the famous painting we have of his bedroom, the chair, the seat of the chair is really flopping up like it's going to hit you in the face, because he's not painting it the way his eyes saw it. He's painting it the way he perceived it, but not how his eyes saw it. He hadn't learned to look, or maybe his mind wasn't focused enough for him to look or to actually see what those lines of the chair were doing. And I'm not sure that the chair would have the same charm that it has, so maybe sometimes, well, we won't even go there. Cheryl, video made reference to edges. I didn't quite catch it, but didn't quite catch it, but that it's the edges that make the lines for either comparison or get proportion and perspective. Seems intuitive, but not when drawing. Yes, and yes, edges are what create shapes. And so when we have shapes within shapes, like I was showing you there in the dogs, and as I was showing you in that little analysis I was doing of the dog, we have shapes within shapes. And so even if if it's just the way the fur is falling against a fold in the dog's neck or whatever, the way the fur is falling will create an edge. It doesn't have to be a hard edge, but if it's distinctive in any way, or in other words, contained in any way, as within a shape, there will be a suggestion of edge there. It is the edges that create shapes. You can't have a shape without an edge. And somebody's going to try to disprove that, and I'd just like somebody to try. But so yes, and when we learn to see that, we learn to look for edges within shapes, edges, the way things are tilting, the way whether it's curved or straight, or a combination of curve and straight, or the ways different portions, smaller edges within the larger shapes, and so on. We start just looking for that sort of thing. Which way is it going, and how large or small is it as related to what's around it? When we just look for that, we look for the direction and the size. When we're just looking for that, we can train ourselves to see what's there. You'll be surprised. Give it a try. You know, when we're done with this, little session, you could just take a simple object that's around you, say a lamp that you happen to be in the room with, or a chair, and just look for that. Just look. Don't try to think of it as chair or a lamp or whatever. Just look for the direction of the movement that's caused by those edges, and the size. Just those two things, you'll be absolutely surprised at what you're going to find. But if you're just get your drawing pad and a pencil and just draw it where that's all you're looking for. You're not trying to draw a chair, and lo and behold, a chair is going to appear in your paper, and you're going to say, well, how about that? Well, okay. See. Stella says, like that, thanks. It's like including myself in the act of composing. Absolutely, Stella. That's a good way of saying it. Yes, it is. We're participating in response to what we actually see, rather than trying to follow somebody else's demands, rather than trying to follow rules. We're using images the way our eyes are seeing them. And the same thing is true for all elements of painting or any other kind of art production, where we've talked about color. The color is an alive thing. It's an active thing. It does stuff. The color does things to other colors, and we've seen that over and over again, especially in our workshops. So, and that's participating. That's the same thing. Okay, I don't want to get too far off subjects. Cheryl says, thinking of Van Gogh, why is it okay when we see a painting where the furniture is not in perspective, yet other times we disapprove when it's off? Cheryl, it depends on who we are, who we is. That's one time when we and is works, doesn't it? It depends on who's looking. The primitive, we accept the primitive painter. Primitive means people that are not, people that haven't studied art from the point of view of what all these things do. They're just painting their response to something. And like the Grandma Moses paintings, for example. And we see a lot of times there, well, there's a lot of work that we call primitive, meaning it's simply done without training or without studying necessarily. And that, I want to take all of that with a little bit of grain of salt. We accept those as true expressions of the person's experience. And it has always been a true expression of the person's experience. If you go back to the prehistoric art, that was more of an expression of the person's experience. Sometimes a lot of us are blessed with seeing these things as an automatic or as an intuitive thing, where our eyes are our ability to see the tilts and all these things as that create images the way they exist in space. Some people see those things automatically without even realizing they're seeing. Other people don't see them quite so well. But that's what has been called talent. I don't approve of that word because I don't approve of that term very much because I think it's overused, it's misused. Because a lot of times we'll see so many comments on Facebook that make me kind of cringe when someone I know who's been studying and somebody who has really studied their craft and really worked on their craft puts up a painting on Facebook and somebody answers, "You're so talented," and it just gags me because it's not talent. That is skill. That's developed skill, and it's not even gift. Why not say something about the painting rather than the artist? But I don't want to go too far over on that because I'm very opinionated and I don't mind admitting it. Nevertheless, what I'm getting at there, according back to Cheryl's question, we accept and actually honor in our society the more primitive approaches to painting when we can see their true expressions. This is a person's expression of something rather than just their overall experience with something. As some people that are expressing something that don't necessarily have the skills to render it as the eyes actually see it. They're expressing an idea of it rather than how their eyes see it. So there's not a correct way to answer that question more than just commenting on it like I did just then. And of course I had to go on a little rant because y'all know I do that. And the older I get, the more I don't care. Stella, and the video, which following the edges over the dog, were the planes taken into account? Yes. Planes change. It's the planes. We could get really technical here and get really confusing. But a plane is simply a surface that, and I don't know how else to call it. It's a surface that it changes and it becomes a different plane. Sorry about that. The old frogs get in my throat sometimes. And sometimes there's an abundance in the community. Abundance of frogs in the neighborhood. And I'm catching them. Anyway, I say don't overcomplicate it. The plane, when we're thinking of planes, we're thinking more in terms of flat surfaces that are tilted, that have a specific direction. But a plane is more of a three-dimensional thing, three-dimensional flat area that has a particular direction. So a vertical plane that's flat, my hand's not totally flat, but it's flat enough. A vertical plane that's flat, then it's tilted vertical. It can become a horizontal plane where it's tilted horizontally, or it could be a diagonal plane that's tilted diagonally. Well, the planes we are observing, when we are observing edges, sometimes the planes will be there, but sometimes if we get really, really too technical and start trying to break that down into planes, it becomes more confusing than when we just look at it as we're looking at a three-dimensional world, but our eyes are actually registering that three-dimensional world two-dimensionally. Now that's kind of an odd thing, but our eyes register that three-dimensional world like a photograph does, and a photograph is two-dimensional. Our eyes see that way, so they're built that way so that we can find our way through space. And it just turns out that because of that, our every time we change our viewpoint, we're actually seeing a three-dimensional world, pardon me, in a two-dimensional space. So I think if we get too technical with that, then we don't want to confuse it. Let's just take one thing at a time and then realize things that are built around. Oh yeah, well that's a plane too, but the plane is the result of, rather than. Well, I don't want to get too deep into that. I think maybe I may have chased a few rabbits there, Stella, and forgive me if I did. But okay, I'm going to leave that right there for the moment. Let's see, where were we?
We're done.
Huh? Is that it?
Yeah.
Are we done for the day?
Well, no, that was. Here's another one.
Okay. Oh, all right. Cheryl says, thank you, Diane, for that answer. I've been thinking a lot about the ability to render perspective or not, and how for some painters it's more part of their style. Yeah, I don't want to call it style. Here I go again, Cheryl. The word style, I would say part of their expression. Style is the result of, not the intention of. So a part of what we recognize as their handwriting, in that terms, if you're accustomed to seeing my handwriting, and you see it, you're going to recognize it as mine. If I'm accustomed to seeing your handwriting, and I recognize it, that's yours. And I still have a warm feeling after all these many years of being. I say all these many years. When I was in college, in those days we wrote letters. As those of you those of you who grew up during the generation when we still wrote letters, know. We still wrote letters and sent them by snail mail because that's how we had. And I can remember when I was in college, going to the mailbox, and I pulled a letter. I saw my mother's handwriting. I knew I got a letter from my mother, and it just had that warm, that warm feeling that you get, like when you get a letter from someone you love. And that style, it was her handwriting developed it as a result of how she learned to form letters and to write them in cursive. My handwriting grew the same way, and much of yours did. But we also recognize handwriting that is contrived. When people intentionally fancy up their handwriting, I don't know what they're trying to prove, but the intent say, well, that's a contrived, and that's not necessarily their true style, but it's a contrived. So I think people misunderstand style, the word style, an awful lot. So I would like to think of it more as a mark of an artist's expression when their work is more primitive than they're conforming to a certain style. Hope I didn't sound too rough on you there, Cheryl, but you ought to be used to that by now. Marie said, wonderful chat, Diane. So many great lessons rolled in. Well, thank you, Marie. I do have a way of getting on a roll, and sometimes I get a roll. I can't roll off it. I just have to put on my brakes. All right, Cheryl says, okay, lovely. Oh, good. Well, thank you. I'm glad you thought that was a lovely answer. And here we are out of time again. Where'd the time go? Haven't we just started this discussion? Okay, let's see now. If I had any notes I wanted to call your attention to, y'all, I guess maybe not. All right. I'm going to give you one more opportunity. Anybody got a last minute question you want to throw in? Because we got to get out of here just within the next few seconds. I'm just going to go. I don't see another question. All right, look. Hey, this was a real good discussion. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll look forward to our chat next month. Don't quite know what the topic's going to be yet, but you will know. I'll be sending out on Substack your newsletters. Those of you that are on the mailing list, you'll get newsletters. It'll go through. It's always on the Substack site. So we'll look forward to them. So do we know yet, Roger, which Sunday next?
I have no idea.
Well, okay. We'll let you know, folks. Is it going to be on the third Sunday in August or the fourth? And we don't know yet. Our schedule's been kind of messed up this summer. That's all right. We're on the same roll. Okay, thanks all. Thank you all. I'll see you next month, and some of you before then. So bye-bye for now.